I work in outpatient pediatrics at Talkback, and Abby had asked me to kind of go over some ways that I use yoga in pediatrics because it is something that I use way more than I thought I would, and I use it weekly for sure. I have a lot of kids that really enjoy it, and there's a lot of things that you can address through yoga, so I'm just going to kind of go over some of those things that I do a lot. So here are some of the things that I work on with yoga. I do a lot of body awareness. I address a lot of my body awareness goals with yoga because you do have to be very aware of your body to get into the poses and to hold them. And a lot of the kids that we see really struggle with where they are in space. That's where you see a lot of that seeking, and they just running into the walls, the right-left discrimination, that kind of stuff. So yoga is a really good way to kind of help build that skill set in a fun way, because it can be kind of tedious to just work on right, left, and all of that. So yoga, I use that quite a bit. Motor planning, so it takes quite a bit of motor planning to get into yoga poses and to copy what someone else is doing. And a lot of our kids, most of our kids really need help with motor planning, so that's a really good way to address that. Core strength. So I would say probably 90% of the kids that I see when I do my evaluations are below the age norms for core strength with holding, prone extension, and supine flexion. And so as you guys know, core strength is really important for development, and yoga is a really good way to work on core strength. So we do a lot of planks and a lot of downward dogs and stuff that you have to really hold your body into place like that. And it's kind of a fun way to work on core strength with older kids too, so you're not just, calling it a plank just to do a plank. There's a yoga sequence that it goes with. And then next, balance. So yoga obviously works on balance, and that is something that a lot of these kids struggle with. So tree pose, triangle, even down dog, trying to hold yourself still. It's really good to work with these kids that have a hard time just staying still, even in a seat. So you can imagine that it's very difficult to stay still in these poses. So I have several kiddos that I'm working towards that with, just even trying to remain still in the pose. And then next is breathing. So if any of you guys do yoga, you know there's a huge emphasis on breathing and how we breathe. And a lot of kids really don't have good coping skills when they get upset, especially like a lot of our kids that are on the spectrum. So that's kind of a good way to get some of that calming and self-regulation. If the kid, even if they aren't necessarily struggling with holding the pose, just teaching them that there's ways to breathe with your body can help promote some of that self-regulation that these kids really struggle with also. Okay, so those are kind of the things that I address the most with the yoga interventions that I do, and I'm going to show you some of the interventions that I use. So here's just some cards, and you can grade this activity and complete it several different ways. If they are a younger kid, not reading yet, that kind of thing, you can have them try to imitate the person in the picture, and that works on that motor planning, it works on that balance, and just having them trying to imitate something they see can be really challenging. With some of my older kids or kids that I'm working on handwriting, that can get very tedious, very fast. So this is kind of a fun way to work on handwriting and incorporate some movement into that also. So I will have them try to far copy or near copy some of these sentences, and then have them, do the pose. So we kind of get a little movement break in there. It kind of breaks up the monotony of trying to work on handwriting. And also, if a child struggles with some auditory processing, you can read the directions for the pose and have them try to get into that pose just based on what they're hearing, which for a lot of kids, that's a great intervention if you're working towards some of those auditory goals. So these cards, I use a million different ways with a lot of different kids, so there's a lot of things you can do with that. And then I have this awesome game. It's a yoga, I think it's called Yogarilla, and so they all incorporate an exercise ball, and so you can have them just copy the pose, you can have them look at it again and try to imitate it, and there's a whole deck of cards, so I use that quite a bit also, and there's like a fun character on there so the kids think it's fun. So that's something I also use quite a bit. And then this has become one of my favorite yoga interventions. It's a memory matching game. So you can play it where they have to turn the tiles over, and get a match. And whenever they get the match, they have to copy the pose. And that's a great game to play with some of these older kids just to mix it up a little bit. It works on some of that visual perceptual skills of the matching, and then also you're incorporating movement with the yoga. So that's another intervention that I use quite a bit. So there are lots of ways to use yoga in pediatrics, and I have found working in outpatient pediatrics in real life that it's something I use all the time, and it's a really good skill set to have and develop in school, because you hear yoga all the time, related to therapy, but it really is something that you can use in your practice. Okay.